A lot to talk about on today's show, but a topic that I don't think has gotten enough discussion is that Russell Wilson has played pretty well so far this season. His numbers are right there with Patrick Mahomes', believe it or not. 791 yards and 6 touchdowns and just 2 interceptions. So despite the defense being awful and the offense not being perfect, Russell Wilson has looked much better this season. So let me know, do you think Russ overall has played well in 2023? Give me a yes or no down in the comment section while we get this video underway, because we're going to talk about some pretty bold topics, if you will. Coming up on today's show, we're going to have, unfortunately, a discussion I thought we would never get to on the channel, and that is whether or not Denver should trade Patrick Surtain if they are going to go on full-on tank mode. Plus, Rex Ryan was on ESPN talking about Denver's defense, and he more or less hinted at the fact that he'd love to be the defensive coordinator. So we'll get to that in just a moment. But make sure to subscribe if you are not already. Consider subscribing for daily content here on the channel. Now, this is a low point for the Broncos Breakdown. Should Denver trade Pat Surtain? I've seen enough chatter online, in the comments, everywhere about, hey, if the Broncos are going to stink, maybe they should try and trade Surtain and get some good assets for him and start the rebuild and sell high, yada, yada, yada. No, you're not trading Patrick Surtain for a lot of reasons. But maybe the biggest reason, because I can follow the train of thought of, hey, if you're 0-3 and you're going to suck and a team offers you a king ransom, maybe take it to start the rebuild. I get that. But here's the issue. Here's my biggest hurdle with trading Pat Surtain, is if you trade PS2, maybe you get 2 first-round picks. And maybe you get a little bit extra. But you're not getting what quarterbacks get for trades. You're not getting 3 first-rounders for a corner. That's just not the value of corners in the NFL. So let's say you get 2 first-round picks. One of those 2 first-round picks is going to be used on a cornerback who is not going to be good as Patrick Surtain. I'm just going to go out and say it. You are not going to find a corner in this upcoming draft who is as good as Pat Surtain is. You're also probably not going to get a top 10 selection, which you used to get Pat Surtain, by the way, with one of these 2 first-round picks. Because if you're trading Pat Surtain away, well, then that means a team that's trading for Pat Surtain feels like they are in win-now mode and they are just one big piece away. So you're talking about a team that's right there either in the playoff hunt or on the playoff bubble. And so they're not going to finish bottom 10. So you're not going to get a bottom 10 or top 10 pick in the draft for Surtain. You're going to have 2 first-rounders, one of which will be used to replace him, and that guy is not going to be as good as Pat Surtain. Why? Because Patrick Surtain II has Hall of Fame talent. He's only 3 years into his career, but the guy looks like he is about to get fitted for his gold jacket. Now, the closest mock trade I could come up with in terms of comparable value was when Jalen Ramsey got traded from the Jags to the Rams. And Jalen Ramsey at that point of his career was pretty similar to what Pat Surtain is doing at this point in his career. I mean, they're not very far off in terms of where they were at their respective times. But the Jags got 2 firsts and a 4th for Jalen Ramsey. So I think Pat Surtain at this point is a little bit better than where Jalen Ramsey was at his point in his career, but not by a whole lot, right? So if you're going to get 2 firsts and maybe a 3rd, or maybe, I don't think you're going to get a 2nd, most of those first-rounders, or those 2 first-rounders, I bet, are going to be in the second half of the first round. You have to look at first-round picks as picks that are not created equal. Picking at 24th overall is very different than picking at 9th overall. You're not getting the same type of talent. I know 32 guys go in the first round, but that does not mean 32 guys are worthy of a first-round selection. It just means 32 guys have to go in round 1. But the reality is most teams don't have 32 guys who they give first-round grades to. They just understand when you're picking at the end of the first round, you got to select someone, and they're going to go down as a first-round pick, but that doesn't mean they have first-round talent. So if you get 2 first-round picks from a team that is right there in the thick of the playoff hunt, or right there in the thick of the playoff race, or whatever you want to call it, and they are selecting 24th, 25th, 26th overall, all of a sudden, you aren't getting nearly what Pat Surtain is worth. It might look really pretty because it's 2 first-round picks, but I'm telling you guys, it's not. It's just not worth it. Pat Surtain, look at what he's done in his NFL career. 3 tackles for loss, 27 pass breakups, 6 interceptions. And his coverage stats, I mean, they are just equally as impressive. Completion percentage, sub 60. Yards per game, 30.8 allowed. Only 8 touchdowns, quarterback rating 79.7. And most of these numbers are a bit on the higher side just because of the Tyreek Hill Week 3 takeover. If you take those numbers out of this, I mean, they are all very close to 0. So you have one outlier that's kind of dragging some of these numbers up, but I don't need to defend Pat Surtain or make the case for Pat Surtain being an incredible NFL player. He is simply untouchable if you are Denver. Now, today's show is being supported by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is a daily fantasy sports app where all you have to do is pick more or less for 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. Prize Picks is super simple and user-friendly. I spend like 1 to 2 minutes on the app every Sunday morning making my selections. So if you're in the Oval Office or you're on your way to the game, the bar, wherever you're watching the game, get on Prize Picks and start making some money. This week on Prize Picks, here's who I'm taking. I've got Desmond Ridder more for 193 yards playing against the London Jaguars. He threw 200 in a loss last week. I'll take more for 193. Najee Harris, I'm going to take less at 52.5. He's not even the best running back on his own team. Give me less there. And then Stephon Diggs, I'm going to take more at 70.5 yards against the Dolphins. I feel like Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs always pop off when they play Miami. So those are my 3 selections over on Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/CLNS and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. The link for that is in the comments and the description of today's video. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Now, if you are living on the wild side and you do want to know what a trade could look like, we're going to come up with a mock trade idea, not the Jalen Ramsey trade, but we have our very own trade idea involving the San Francisco 49ers as a team that I could see being maybe a little bit interested. Oh, Magic Act Houdini, I'm back on screen. So I think the 49ers could be a team that would, if word got out that Denver would at least listen to offers, I could see San Francisco picking up the phone and making a call. And maybe it's 2 firsts and a third. I want it on the record right now. I would say no to this. I would decline this if John Lynch and Shanahan called Denver and said, hey, what would it take to get Pat Surtain? The answer is nothing you have to offer. The answer is all of your starters. Like, of course, that's ridiculous, and it would never get, it would never go through, but that's the point I'm trying to make here. Pat Surtain, he's untouchable. He's just that good of a player that no matter what you get in return, it's not going to amount to what Pat Surtain is. It's not going to be a trade you look back on and think, hey, we came out of this pretty nicely. But let me know. What do you do this trade? Type A for accept or type D for decline. Let me know down in the comment section below if ultimately you would do this trade. I'm typing D for decline, but if you disagree, I'd love to hear your argument. To kind of put a bow on this thing, I just want to say, when has trading away Hall of Fame talent ever worked out for the team? Honestly. I mean, who won the Champ Bailey trade? Not Washington. That would be Denver, right? Go down memory lane. There's a lot of instances. Marshall Faulk getting traded from the Colts to the Rams, right? The Bus getting traded from the Rams to the Steelers. There are lots of instances where big-name players got traded entering or in the prime of their careers. The Rams got a Super Bowl with Jalen Ramsey. What did the Jags do with the first-round picks they got? Were either of them Trevor Lawrence? No. I don't think you're going to find yourself in a good spot in a few years if you get 2 first-round picks for Pat Surtain. You use one of them on a corner who inevitably is not going to be as good, and maybe the other is on an offensive lineman who gives you 5 years of starting, 5 years of starting tape or whatever, and then you move on from after that. Just not going to buy into this idea. All right, next up, let's talk about Rex Ryan. Does he want to be the Broncos defensive coordinator? Remember back in February, it was between Vance Joseph and Rex Ryan. Ultimately, Denver opted to go back to back to Vance Joseph, and that has not worked out well. And Rex Ryan, he's keeping receipts on this. He was on ESPN's Get Up talking about Denver giving up 70 points to the Dolphins. And here's what he said. Are you kidding me? That could have been me. Maybe they should have ponied up a little bit. You know what I'm saying? I see it as absolutely a disgrace. This is an absolute disaster. This defense was literally supposed to be a top 5 defense in the league. And maybe number 1 with the right guy running it. Wonder who he's insinuating could be that right guy running it. And I wonder what he meant by ponying up a little bit more. Did Denver cheap out? You know, they spent a lot of money on Russell Wilson and Sean Payton. Doesn't sound like the Walton Penners to not write blank checks. They've been doing it since they took over this team. But that's definitely an extra little nugget right there. But yeah, look at Denver's defense through the first 3 weeks this year compared to the first 3 weeks of last year. Of course, the Dolphins game as an outlier is going to skew the numbers a little bit. But even if you just cut the Dolphins' numbers in half, right? Instead of 726 yards, they get 350 yards or so. They are still way ahead of what they did last year. Even if they don't score 70 points, let's say they just score 40 points. They're still doubling up the points allowed they gave in 2022. Takeaways are down, passing, rushing. Every metric, every number is up through the first 3 weeks of this year compared to last year. So who's to say Rex Ryan is wrong? I mean, he's absolutely spot on. I don't know if Rex Ryan would have been a good defensive coordinator for Denver, but there's no way he could have been worse. This defense could not be worse than what it is right now. Now, here's the unfortunate thing. This team couldn't be worse. And Sean Payton, when he did that USA Today interview where he just completely threw Hackett into the wood chipper, well, I think you guys might recall one interesting little quote he gave in this interview, and I want to remind everyone of it. But everybody's got a little stink on their hands. It's not just Russell. It was a poor offensive line. It might have been one of the worst coaching jobs in the history of the NFL. That's how bad it was. Sean, you just gave up 70 points and lost by 50. Karma's a bitch. That's the reality here. You ran your mouth before the season. I was a little bit of a sheep going, hey, maybe this is just him trying to fire up the locker room, right? Maybe this is him trying to get everyone juiced up and ready to have a brick wall to run through. Or maybe you shouldn't have run your mouth and put a big target on your back and made this team the laughingstock of the NFL. Sure, the Chicago Bears might be a little bit worse, but the Chicago Bears don't have a $200+ million quarterback. They don't have Sean Payton at the helm, who Denver traded a first-round pick to get for. They don't have a defense that wildly regressed. The Chicago Bears were the worst team in football last year. They are still the worst team in football right now. But Denver was not the worst team in football last year. They were one of the worst. And despite making a lot of improvements as we thought they were in the offseason, they appear to have gotten worse so far through the first 3 games of 2023. So let me know, what's your confidence level in Sean Payton? Scale of 1 to 10. 1 being you are Sean Payton and you have no fear whatsoever that this thing is going to turn around. 10 being the world's on fire and this team is about to have Caleb Williams next year, which I wouldn't be opposed to. I don't think Sean Payton is washed. I don't think this is an instance where, hey, Denver got fleeced on back-to-back trades. They got a washed quarterback in Russell Wilson, who's not looking too washed right now. And Sean Payton, I don't know how you get washed as a head coach. I don't think you just lose the ability to coach. And he coached a lot of great teams in New Orleans. I think hiring Vance Joseph was a mistake. That's pretty clear at this point. And that is something that's going to go on Sean Payton's record as, hey, you dropped the ball on that one, right? You're an offensive guy. You had to hire a good DC to maintain a good defense from last year, a great defense from last year, and you dropped the ball. You hired a guy who already had some experience in Denver and was more or less a failure as a head coach. You brought him back. You thought you could do the whole Wade Phillips thing over again, and it didn't work out. I also think it's worth noting this roster needs work. Sure, it's easy to look at the 2022 Broncos defense and go, they were great. What happened? A lot of that's on coaching. But I also think there's a reality here of this roster might not be as talented as we think it is. And that's a bit of a, pass for Sean Payton, even though he's got a lot of work to do as a coach right now. But this roster, it's just not as good as we want to think it is. And maybe that's why this team sucks. Let's be honest. All right, that's going to do it for us on today's show. Shout out to you for tuning in. It is tough. Being in the trenches for an 0-3 team does not get worse than that. The only thing worse than that is being in the trenches for an 0-4 team. But hopefully that does not continue this upcoming Sunday in Chicago.